Welcome to completing a tax form for COM 20. For this video, we are using the 2016 forms. With your particular assignment, you will be using forms for the current tax year. That being said, we'll get started. And we're doing taxes for a man named Paul Brown. Now, Paul has worked at a couple of places, and he has received T4s. The first place that we see that he's worked at is Sam's Shoe Store. We can see his T4 receipt here. I will be referring to these throughout. And as we take a look, he has also worked for Dan's Vegan Emporium, and this receipt is here, and he will be using things from both receipts. Now, Paul has also done a couple of other things throughout this tax year that we will be looking at. The first one is that he has contributed $500 and put it in an RRSP, and he has received this tax receipt. Second thing is that he has donated $300 to a charity, and he is going to be claiming this. Now, with Paul's particular taxes, it would probably be more beneficial for Paul to actually save the giving receipt and use it in a year that he has a higher income, as he is going to be getting all his taxes back based on his income. And he should be filling out and claiming the RSP receipt, however, not actually using it as a deduction. I will be filling out the forms as if they were a deduction, and the reason for that is to correspond with your actual assignment. So, first thing Paul is going to do is he is going to need the T1 general form. Okay, the T1 general form is a form that looks like this one here. And first thing Paul is going to need to do is print out his regular sort of information. His first name is Paul, last name Brown. His mailing address is 555 Main Street in City, Alberta. Y2C6Z4 is the postal code, and the reason why we're using this is because that's what is printed on his T4. His social insurance number, for COM, we're always going to be using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Please never put your actual social insurance number unless it is actually needed. We are going to assume that Paul Brown is in fact 16 and was born in the year 2000, January 2nd. He speaks English. Taking a look, he can register an email address online. You can do that, or you can choose not to do that. Paul is single, and we are not filling this out for a deceased person. Paul is still alive. Okay, so we're going to fill up the top portion. The other thing that we need to include on here is information about Paul's residence. And Paul is, again, we are going to assume that Paul is an Alberta resident. This information would be as if he had a spouse or common law partner. We said that he was single, and so as such we are not filling this out. And because we're assuming Paul has been in Alberta and stayed in Alberta, we are not filling in anything here. On the bottom of page 1 of the T1 General, we can see some information about Elections Canada. What this really does is it just says, hey, this information can be given to Elections Canada. The only reason why I would not personally check yes would be as if I was moving relatively in short order. I knew that I was moving, and therefore I would be checking yes to those things. Otherwise, I'd be checking no to those things if I was moving. Otherwise, I'd be checking yes, and usually I do wind up checking yes. And that is the first page. As we continue along, moving on, we can see the second page. Do we have any foreign property? Fact is, Paul is 16. He does not own over $100,000 worth of foreign investments. So we're going to be checking no. The next thing here is we are going to include his employment income. That is line 101. And we take a value from both his T4 slips, and using his T4 slips, right, that we showed earlier, that is from Dan's Vegan Emporium. He made $3,600. And then from Sam's Shoe Store, he made $2,600. And that is line 14 on both T4 receipts, T4 forms that he has received from his employers. And so the combined amount of both of those is $6,200. And so we are going to be putting that in line 101 over here. Almost everything else on this page is not particular to Paul Brown's tax form. You have to remember that these tax forms are set for all people at all times, and so we see he has not received any commissions. He does not receive universal child care benefit. He does not receive CPP or EI or old age security. No dividends or interest on investments. No rental incomes or capital gains. All these things will pertain to some individuals, but not in particular Paul Brown. And so the sum of everything in this particular column is $6,200. And we have now finished page 2 of 4. Okay, so moving on to page 3, we see that we need to enter total income from the previous page, which is, in Paul Brown's case, $6,200. And we're going down and we see that there is, in fact, one thing that he has done. He has put money into a RRSP, and for that we are going to need to complete the Schedule 7. So we're going to now move to Schedule 7, complete the Schedule 7, and then come back to this particular form. Okay, taking that off and moving to Schedule number 7. Schedule number 7 looks like this. Okay, and as we take a look, the first part here is contributions, as this is in fact Paul Brown's first time completing a tax form and first time that he has put money into an RSP. His amount will in fact be 0 in terms of this unused contribution. In subsequent tax years, you get a notice saying how much room you in fact have. Paul Brown has made a $500 RSP contribution, and it was done between March 1st and December 31st. 0 otherwise, and so he's put in $500. And so we've got a total of $500. Now, ideally, what Paul would be doing is eventually not using this amount, but we're going to assume that he, in fact, is. Taking a look at the next little section, Part B. Part B refers to the home buyer's plan or the lifelong learning plan. If Paul had taken money out of his RSP in order to buy home or for learning, he would be repaying it here. But he doesn't have anything valid here. We're going to leave that blank because blank represents insignificant zero, meaning it's not applicable. And so the total amount that he has contributed is $500. Okay. So moving along with Schedule 7, we see Part C. Enter the amount that we are deducting. We're going to deduct $500. Now, the other thing is the next line we see, not significant, is line 14. This is an important line. Paul really should be using a zero here as he will be getting his tax form. However, we're going to put 500 to correspond with your actual tax assignment. He will be using all of this amount, 500, which means that we are going to deduct $500. And we see this is the amount that we're actually going to use, that line on the previous page. And therefore, this number will be 0. Now, if Paul Brown was choosing not to use this, he in fact could enter a 0 in this spot, and thus it would calculate down to 0 and 0 here, and thus this number here, line 18, would be 500, which he could then use in other years to lower his taxes. But in this case, we're just following it this way. And so when we go back to our T1, T1 General, we see line 208. $500 is what we're putting here, which we got from our Schedule 7. Okay, almost everything down here is now not significant in terms of things that Paul Brown is choosing to deduct. So for examples, moving expenses, disability deductions, childcare expenses, those forms would need to have been filled out as well, but we're doing that basic tax form minus $500. So that initial $6,200 minus the $500 gets you $5,700, which means $5,700 will go here, and that is the net income. Okay. We see that all these other possible things that could be considered as taxable income are here, none of which applied to Paul, and so this becomes $5,700, and I made a little mistake there. $5,700 is what we do, and we see our next step is to complete, use a Schedule 1 and a 428 form in order for us to run some calculation.